28-3. Arthur Blank loving it. Up by 25. Toss to White. He's in! What a comeback!
All right, welcome back to another episode of the 28-3 podcast. I'm Corey, here with Max and Nick. So the Saints have made their initial 53-man roster, going down from 90 players on their preseason roster all the way down to 53. We are recording this on Wednesday, so they have made their practice squad additions. But I think the news of yesterday, Tuesday, was significant. There was a lot of expected keeps, even for some of the new guys, but definitely was not without surprises, as the Saints always do. There's something in there that makes you either scratch your head, makes you question whether you know more than a coach or a GM, but nonetheless, they made their cuts. So, Max, what were your thoughts and the standouts, surprises from what you saw? Let's talk about the 53 first. We can get to the practice squad later.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise was the special teams. We've got a brand new kicker, brand new punter, both rookies.
Yeah.
One of them's a 30-year-old rookie with a pretty crazy background story. But no, I love that they traded Lutz and got something for him. We've talked about it before. All things being equal, it comes down to the money. Keep the cheaper guy at the kicker position. And so it was the worst kept secret that Sean Payton was going to be sniffing around Will Lutz. It came to fruition. The Gillikin thing was a little surprising. I didn't think they would pull the trigger on getting him out of the building. But I think the Saints special teams coordinator, he was talking about Headley, and it was in an interview today, I believe. They got posted on Twitter. And he was talking about how the unique way, he punched the ball, the whole rugby background and all of that, that played a part in why they wanted to keep him over Gillikin. So,
yeah, I listened to that same interview. There was some really interesting tidbits that I'm not sure I necessarily even knew that I would have wanted to know about special teams and kicking technique that Darren Rizzi, the special teams coordinator, went into, but pretty eye-opening. He also mentioned a couple things, since we're on topic of the kickers, Groupie. He was talking about he's got short stature, but he's got a hell of a backswing. Basically, when he brings his leg back, it just generates so much power. I know that coach wasn't necessarily worried about the salary cap, and it just makes you wonder. Now, we know it came into play, of course, but it was interesting hearing him provide some kind of seemingly technical reasons as to, that factored into Groupie over Lutz.
Let's also, as far as the Gillikin thing, he didn't do himself any favors even in the last preseason game either. I think when we talked last week, we thought he would hang on to it. He looked pretty bad, especially in the first quarter or first half. He left that door open clearly. And I think the cost cutting that Max was talking about from, trading Lutz, we saw that elsewhere too. I think that's generally the impetus behind the Roby cut, was give a younger guy, we feel pretty solid with our top three. He's a luxury. We're going to save some, I think it was $3 million plus there as well, which gives us quite a bit of money if there's anyone out there they're looking at. I know that a lot of names have signed, but there's still some people out there that could help a team for sure. So I'm curious to see what happens here before the first games as far as that goes. You see the running backs, all the Tony Jones news and that, and then Kareem Hunt being here. I'm wondering if there's something planned there with the minor injuries we have and them putting Merriweather down on the practice squad. Obviously, they could call him right back up, but I'm wondering if there's a move there, and I'm still wondering if there's a move at edge rusher somewhere. That'd be something I'd like to see more depth than we have right now. We've seen some of those names go away, but there's a couple people out there that could help us, I think.
Yeah, well, don't talk to Cam Jordan about being an edge rusher. He is a defensive end, very clear in his tweets. But I'm sorry, X's. What you got, Max? You had some?
Yeah, and Nick brought up a good point about the running back situation. Right now with Kamara, he's not allowed in the building for the next 3 weeks. We have Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller, Kirk Merritt, who just recently moved to running back from wide receiver, and he's also been nursing an injury for the past 2 weeks. So, like Nick said, I would not be surprised if there's a move that's coming this week or next week before the game, because we do have the bye week this weekend. As we've touched on, this is not the final 53.
Right.
There's still plenty of moves that could happen between now and week one. The offensive line situation, I wouldn't be surprised to see him add another offensive lineman. Our second and third stringers were not at all impressive in the preseason. No. And you saw that when they pretty much cleaned house with those guys. Throckmorton, I was a little surprised Throckmorton was cut, given that he's such a versatile player who can play tackle, guard, or center. But yeah, that just shows you they really did not perform well in the preseason. So I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in another offensive lineman.
Let's talk about that real quick. Is Andrews Pete the most expensive backup guard in NFL history?
He's up there, man.
He might be. At this point, it's kind of like he's just whether he's a backup or even if he was a third stringer, it comes, for me, it's like a sunk cost almost. It's kind of like we're paying him what we're paying him. The question is he going to provide your best level of protection at left guard, but protection or run block? And if the answer is no, then I would at least appreciate that we're willing to be an NFL team, because you hear about this in the NFL that draft picks play over UDFAs just because sometimes, like, some coaches have this loyalty thing worked in. Some GMs, you got Jerry Jones saying, we're paying this guy, get him in there. And I appreciate that we're willing to say, Hurst is outplaying you. We're going to put him in. Now, does that mean that Hurst outplaying Pete is a great thing? Not necessarily. But I don't know. His salary to me is a wash at this point.
Yeah, but what it says to me, just seeing how they've acted in the last week here, it would tell me that no one's even willing to take his contract.
That's not a good.
Yeah. I mean, if they would probably, just to dump that contract, give him away because he's uncuttable. They give him away for a seventh just to get him off the books.
It would have been pretty incredible if in the same round of roster cuts, Pete and Lutz both got traded for the same draft pick.
That would have been awesome.
But we weren't so lucky, it turns out.
Well, I'll say this about the offensive line situation, and Pete in particular. I think it's a matter of time before Nick Saldiveri is the starting left guard. It's to me, it's imminent. Now, not in the first half of the season. I think it's more of the, I guess it was Teron Armstead who got in late in his rookie year. I think it's one of those situations where we get to like week 11, 12, 13, and Saldiveri at that point has, gotten the reps in practice and has shown that he's capable, and the coaching staff goes ahead and puts him in. Because I think Hurst and Pete, it's a matter of time before both of them get hurt.
Well, I was going to say they'll be injured by that point, so
they'll be injured,
or not.
But I think they want him to. There's a reason they picked him in the, I think it was a 4th-round pick this year, and they obviously saw something in him. That pick got rave reviews initially. There was word leaked out that there were so many offensive line coach around the league that wanted Saldiveri, and most of us had never heard of him. Right. You know what I mean? Coming from Old Dominion, I think it was, and
Idaho.
not Caden Ellis' alma mater, but I think it was Old Dominion. It's like nobody, no casual football watcher or even rabid SEC watcher had any clue who this guy was.
Yeah, and if anybody did, if you were watching a draft, like we were had Adam and Michael and Daniel and all those guys in for the meetup, if any one of us was sitting around the table and was like, who I really want in this draft or in this round, man, that's Saldiveri kid out of Old Dominion. Like, let's get him. I think if anybody said that, we'd have been like, what?
I was hoping you were going to claim him. Like, I figured you were going to go ahead and get out there on the mountain you like to be on and go ahead and say you knew about him.
I'd
You've
be
been scouting
lying
him since he was a sophomore in high school.
I'd be lying if that thought did not very poignantly cross my mind just now. But I feel like I have to kind of limit myself. I think I claimed – there's somebody else I claimed It was hilarious because a couple episodes ago, and you and Nick were just riffing so and so, and all it took was me just jumping in and saying, "My guy," and y'all just like froze, like, "Oh, come on, not him too."
John Trey.
Yeah, I mean, look, I did go out on a limb. Max says that's conservative, but putting John Trey on the 53. Now, he's not on my initial 53, but he could be on the week 1 53 because we don't know what's happening with Traquan. So
I don't think Traquan's going on IR.
That was going to be something I wanted to ask y'all about because, all right, when we did our 53-man roster projection episode, we did, it was the first annual, the inaugural Corey's Final Cuts hashtag. I believe it's trademarked, maybe not legally yet, but we went through and, like I said, I felt the need to make some kind of bold and or weird twist type of move. And so the one I went with was them putting John Trey on the 53. But in order to clear room for that, because I don't disagree with everyone that Traquan is just the turd that won't flush and the cockroach that won't die. But in order to clear room for John Trey to get on there was putting Traquan on the IR, at least the 4-week, which would have required him to technically make the team, then go on IR. But I found it interesting that when we did that episode, and I mentioned IR, this isn't a told you anything, but the IR movement for Traquan has since picked up steam since we've mentioned that on our episode. I'm not saying everybody's listening. No, I'm not saying that. But when we first mentioned it, it was like, no. Even Traquan, they wouldn't put on IR. Now it's being talked about fully consumed by all outlets that it's a possibility just because we haven't heard from him in 3 weeks.
It's surprising that if it was going to happen, I would think it would have happened already.
Well,
you know what I mean? And then they bring Jalen Smith back up or some other corresponding move. I don't see it happening since it hasn't happened.
So since we're on the topic of the roster, and this is kind of like our roster recap, and also, we can compare what we had last episode versus what came down on Tuesday. But there's 2 adjustments to the initial roster that I'm still thinking are going to come through. And whether or not John Trey, let's just say Traquan does go on IR. So today at 3 p.m. our time, I believe it is, maybe 2 p.m. Central, whatever, was the soonest that they could actually put someone on the IR without him being out for the entire year. So if they had put him on the IR before 2 p.m. Central today, he would have been out for the season. So 2 p.m. today was the first they could put him on that 4-week IR. So I was actually flipping through, refreshing the feed, hoping that news was going to come down today. It's like, please just do it. Just do it. At least we got some good news with the Jalen Smith news, but that's the other adjustment I think is coming down. When they're going to do it, who knows? Because it's not really an urgent need to do it. But I think you see before the Titans game, I think you see DeMarco Jackson go to waivers, clear it, go to practice squad, Jalen elevated to the 53 before he has to be in the lineup for week 1, in my opinion.
Yeah, but they can just elevate him.
But they have to make a corresponding move because DeMarco's on the roster.
Right. But it's I don't think DeMarco is going to get. I don't think he's going to get cut, man. They value his special teams.
Yeah, I mean,
he's a young, promising linebacker. You're not going to just cut
could
him.
be it. But I mean, if you elevate Jalen and don't have any corresponding move at the linebacker position, then you're carrying 6 active into week 1.
It doesn't have to be a linebacker.
It doesn't have to be a linebacker.
I'm saying, but what I'm saying is, if it's not at the linebacker position, then you're going to have 6 linebackers on your roster in week 1. Maybe they're okay with that.
Well, it could be somebody like a Keith Kirkwood. You know what I mean? He's going to clear waivers. No one's going to claim him. That's the candidate you're looking at if they're going to do a move like that. You're not going to put someone who's in their second year, former 4th or 5th round pick like DeMarco Jackson, who has shown promise. He just needs a little more seasoning. They're not going to expose him to waivers. You're going to put someone like a Keith Kirkwood who's been around 6 years or so, and really nobody else values him like we do. So that's the kind of person you could kind of slip through to the practice squad.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you brought up your Corey's cuts. Why don't we go down that list and see where we hit and miss?
Yeah.
Let's just go by position, I think, is the easiest. And
so QB got those. My first, I only had one edition. I was going to say my first edition, but I put Darrell Williams on there, even with the Kamara suspension. That was that was wrong.
We got to give Nick the win on running back because he's the one who brought up Kirk Merritt. He called that out. I thought it would be Merriweather. You thought it was going to be Darrell Williams, and he said Merritt. So, yeah.
Yep. And so I said they're keeping Prentice no matter what they did. Tight ends was easy. We're right on that. Thanks, Sean Payton, for picking up the crawl. Wide receiver, I made my bold stand with Kirkland. Still yet to be seen. But on the initial 53, were you right on that?
We had this. You missed this one, Corey.
I was the only one that didn't want to put Traquan on the active 53. Y'all. So that was easy. You got the 6 there. Now, O-line's where it got surprising because you had your 6, which we've talked about, your starting 5 from last year, Hurst. And then on the CFC, I went with Saldivari. That was a check. Young, that was a check. And then Throckmorton was one of the surprises of the day.
And honestly, we all agreed on the offensive lineman. Yeah, so we all missed on Garcia and Throckmorton.
Yeah, now one guy, I had them completely cutting 2 of the offensive linemen that they put on the practice squad, that being Kramer and Mark Evans II. I just didn't see.
Yeah, but we're not going to worry about the practice squad.
That is what
Let's just worry about
and then let's see, the 5 defensive ends, that was easy. Jordan, Granderson, Turner, Passignon, Foskey. DL, that was chalk. Sanders, Shepard, Brizzy, Roach. Linebacker, okay, so this is where it's a little. I think did we agree on the 5? Because we had
we all had Jalen for sure.
We had Davis Warner.
Yeah, we all missed on that one.
Vaughn, Jalen, and Sewell. Yeah, I think it was a curveball by them cutting Smith, but maybe we just didn't think it through enough that, like you mentioned, Max, with the guaranteed contract issue. I think this is the 5 they carry into week 1. What we just talked about was they could carry the 5 they kept plus Jalen, so you'd have 6 linebackers going into week 1. Yet to be seen, but we're 1.5 off there, we'll call it.
Let me say this. I think Jalen Smith, after week 1, is absolutely going to be signed to the roster. I think it's a matter of the guaranteed contract, like I mentioned before. That's all it is.
It's like the practice.
With his history of injuries, they wanted to just say, you know what, let's get through week 1. We'll get him on the back on the contract for week 2.
He's on the practice squad / full-time contract negotiation waiting room at this point.
Exactly.
Okay, so then we go to corner. I mean, to me, this was surprising. I think the surprise of the day, I think it counts as a corner, the nickel, Roby, being fully released. The more people talked about it.
We all missed that. We missed
it. If you would have told me when we recorded this, the last episode on, I think it was last week, whatever it was, that the 4 would not be what we had, but it would be Lattimore, Debo, Taylor. I'd be like, yeah, of course, those 3. Yadam. That Yadam is number 4. And it's kind of, to me, I'm like, look, we got scouts for a reason, I guess. But that was a surprise to me.
You know what? We should have seen it coming, much like the Kirkwood, because I think Underhill, Triplett, all those guys have been talking Yadam up the entire training camp and saying, this dude, he's flashing. He's got a real chance of making the roster. Do not be surprised if he makes the roster.
Yeah.
And he made the roster. It was the same conversation people were having about Kirkwood. It's like the casual fan or us. I mean, it's like we didn't expect Kirkwood. When we signed Kirkwood, I'm like, oh, he's a camp body. He's the 8th or 9th receiver going into camp. He'll be off the team in no time. Same thing with Yadam. It's like, oh, this guy's, he's the 8th or 9th cornerback. No way he makes the team. Well, and they both made the team.
Kirkwood did flash, though, when...
No, he didn't. Kirkwood had like 5 drops in his 2 games last year. He's terrible.
Oh, last year, but I mean, like his first preseason, it was one of those... who's the other guy we talked? Manuel Butler? Was it one of those situations?
Yeah.
Look, Kirkwood...
That was like 5 years ago, dude. That was like 5 years ago.
Kirkwood didn't make the team to catch the ball. Let's be honest.
Yeah, he made the team.
They've got so many options catching the ball this year with the tight ends and the receivers. He's there to block and be in on some of those downs. And
Mickey Loomis is determined to have generations of Traquan Smith. I mean, our kids are going to be talking about how they can't believe Kirkwood just retired or some shit like that. And then the next guy's going to come in and maybe not that far in the future, but you get my point. All right. So we can move on to safety. All right.
All right. Let me interject here. So safety is where we should have grouped it all together because you got a couple of guys that can play corner and safety.
Yeah.
One of which is the one I told y'all was going to make the team, Ugo Amadi, because he can play corner and safety. So y'all were both off on that one.
You can take your credit on Amadi. I encourage you to. I already went on record with y'all on our group text that if Kirkland did make the 53, I would gladly take undue amounts of credit for making that pick. It did not come to fruition. Yours did, but more of a sound selection there, I would say, Max.
So y'all also missed on Smoke Monday. And I know Corey had Jonathan Abram on there, and I think Nick agreed with him on that. So safety was a big swinging point.
Well, I think the Abram thing could work out exactly as I put it on
this year.
On the 53. Because
he's going to play for us, but he's not on the initial 53, which is what we were talking about.
Well, I had Abram on here as during May's suspension. So the asterisk next to May and the asterisk next to Abram to our listeners, you can find this on the Twitter /X. But so it's Abram comes into the group of 6 safeties if May is not playing. So right now,
but
that still checks out.
He is not exactly, but he is not suspended yet, is he?
Right. So that's why there's an asterisk.
Yeah, he did say that. He said if he gets suspended, and I thought Abram would make it. Monday, I don't know if Corey was that committal. I said he had a chance. I didn't say he was making it.
No.
I said
y'all were both jumping on me about Monday, and I love Monday. I've been on Monday before.
You need to go listen again. I think
Nick, you were very
coming off game 2. I said he played great. I did. I said he played great in game 2, and then that he has a chance to make the team.
You were talking about Monday like it was Sunday, dude. Like you were anticipating that guy. Like you were like, I can't.
Oh, I loved him. I loved him in college. But
I'll say
I didn't see it I didn't see him making the team.
I said he was making the 53. I really thought he was.
Yeah.
The fact that he didn't even make the practice squad is just nuts. I mean, I don't know.
He was pretty bad in the last game. I'll be honest with you. He was awful.
I didn't even see him
at the goal line. He whiffed on another one in the flat. I mean, whiffed. It was bad.
Yeah.
I didn't think he was good in the first game. The second game, he had a good game. But the first and the third game, he didn't look good.
And let's be honest. I mean, I had the thought. It was too hard to convey over our text message. But the reality is, if Smoke Monday's name was Mike Smith,
exactly,
I don't think we're having this conversation. Like if a guy with his name's so damn cool, and that's part of the. I mean, look, the league, it is what it is. It's still more than half. It's 90% entertainment, 10% sport, and so when a guy who's before he says anything in any press conference is going live on his Instagram, filming the Georgia Dome, talking shit about the Falcons, and his name is Smoke Monday, like. Everyone wanted him to be the starting safety at that exact moment. Like, just get in there, bust some heads. And then it looked like he was doing pretty well in training camp. Then he gets hurt. So everybody's rooting for him for a bunch of different reasons. I think if you poll 80% of Saints fans, the reasons they're rooting for him, they probably have a hard time giving you factual football reasons why they were. So, I hate to say it, but yeah, it probably makes sense. We were clouded by the smoke.
You know what, though?
Got nothing on that? I thought that was good. I thought that was good one. We're clouded by the...
I wouldn't be surprised if he finds his way onto the practice squad over the next couple of weeks. Because keep in mind, with the practice squad rules now, you can elevate a player to the game day roster, I think it's 3 times, and then you can't do it again.
The only thing I haven't seen...
You're going to have a situation at some point where, the guys we elevate, the eligibility runs out, and they're going to move on from the practice squad and they'll go somewhere else. And I think Smoke, if he doesn't catch on with another team, I wouldn't be surprised if by week 5, 6, 7, he finds his way back onto the practice squad.
I guess there's no rule about how many times you can be waived and brought back on.
No, it's the Andy Tanner rule, dude. You can do it 1,000,000 times.
Yeah.
You don't remember that?
So, vaguely.
I just remember one of them, it might have been Underhill. He was tracking it. And it was like the dude had been cut and re-signed to the practice squad like 40 times. Something crazy over like 3 years.
Dude's like brushing his teeth. Cut? Yep. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Taking a shit. Signed? Great.
Yep.
That's funny.
So there's no limit. You can do it as much as you want.
Yeah, so maybe Smoke Monday's the next Andy Tanner.
And look, the other thing to think about, he's still coming off that big injury. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like maybe he needs a little bit more time to get back to 100%.
Yeah, he might not be 100%. So we were right about Lonnie Johnson. JT Gray's obvious. Starters from last year, May Matthew.
The kickers, punters, obviously, we were all off.
Okay, so...
Well, everyone did say, Groupie had a shot if Peyton was interested that they would take the money. We all said that, and that did happen. I think we were all blindsided by the punter.
I don't know about blindside. I mean, I think everyone obviously saw the possibility, but I think we're so used to the Saints, doing the safe thing or going with the known commodity versus the new / risky move that, I mean, with Lutz, you had the contract situation, so we saw the literal dollars and cents on that one. But with Headley, it was kind of like
a performance that merited really giving him a shot. He didn't excel. Let's be honest.
We talk about Lutz or Headley?
No, Headley.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think I'm not putting everything. Well, I don't know if Rizzi today in his press conference talked so much about why Headley was over Gillikin, but I think it comes down to that whole idea that, us as fans, we can only see so much that is really the kicker, no pun intended, for why one kicker punter makes it over another. And I think with Headley, someone mentioned that there's so many different factors and optics they look at, but Headley could put the ball where they wanted it. I mean, it was like he might not. Or put it this way, Rizzi said it's all about the net. Like he said this in the press conference straight up. He's just like, it's about net average. And there's a bunch of different ways to get a large net average. You could be a guy that punts the shit out of the ball. He didn't say that exactly, but you go 70 yards with your punt in the air. But if it gets returned for 30, that's a 40 net average. Or you be a guy who punts it 40 with the right amount of hang time and there's no return. Both ways are the net average. So I think whatever it is in Headley tells me that he's more likely to get the net punt average they would.
I'm just saying that's something they must have seen in practice because we did not see it. I didn't
see it in the game.
Yeah. I think you give the nod to the previous starter going in and someone's got to take their job. We didn't see him take the job. So it must be something they were seeing in the practice field that separated them because it was hard to see that in what we saw in the preseason.
Yeah. And I think punter.
But let's not forget that both Lutz was poor last year. And Gillikin was poor last year, especially in big spots. They were both pretty bad, so we can't be too surprised, I guess.
And when it comes down to keeping the veteran who's got skins on the wall or who has enough prior snaps, I think that's when kicker and punter become totally different animals. My reasons for thinking, I think after the Texans game, seeing how well Groupie did, it made sense that the Saints would go with Groupie over Lutz. But I still felt uneasy when I'm thinking, pound for pound, if it's a 1-to-1, do you want the guy who's made kicks in pressure situations before, or do you want the rookie? At least with the kicker spot, whole other level of nerves come in about being there before, pressure situations, whereas punter, you can go with the incumbent guy, but it won't be for the same reasons. That's why I would have been okay. I'm okay with what we did, but those were considerations to me. I think with Headley, it's skill.
You know what? I think I want to go back and listen to our post-draft episode. I think it was the one where we were talking about the undrafted free agents. Because if I remember correctly, I want to say I was like, we got to get rid of Lutz, Gillikin too. I want Headley and Groupie as my kicker.
You did bring it up
out of my ass. Yeah, I remember bringing it up. And this is, look, I'm not going to say I was in on these two guys like Corey was on Caden Ellis. But
no, we were saying I just want something different.
I was talking out of my ass.
Nobody goes that deep, Max.
I was talking out of my ass because I wanted Lutz and his salary off of the team, and I wanted Gillikin off of the team. So, and I do look. I remember Lou Headley when he got to Miami because the biggest thing was he wore number 94 at Miami because he was a big fan of The Rock.
Yep.
So I'm like, all right, this guy's cool. And I read his story. Owned a tattoo shop. Was scaffolding. Sold his tattoo shop to move to America. I mean, the guy's story is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, longtime listener of the pod. Actually, don't know that, but I do. He does not. But he tweeted out to Headley like today, yesterday. He gave him a congrats.
Today, I think. Yeah,
tweet. It was awesome. Yeah. But you did. You I'm not gonna say you quote called it, but you put it into the universe.
I tried to manifest it back in April or May, I guess it was.
Yeah,
and
you did.
Look, it happened. Did. So it kind of, hey, it worked. So now I just need to manifest the Super Bowl.
Yeah, you should manifest the shit out of that if it worked on the guy with the neck tats and the Rock's number from Miami. But I will say this, and people are right about this with the new kickers. The second they hit a bad one, dude, the second they miss I mean, if Groupie's got a kick and we're down by 2 with time expiring and that shit doesn't go in, it's not going to be fun.
We'll hear Peyton's a genius.
If Headley shanks it when we need to pin him back and it's Trevor Lawrence on the other side and we're trying to keep him from going down the field in 2 minutes and Headley shanks it instead, it's not going to be fun. And that's the risk. Deuce McAllister actually said it on the radio this afternoon. He was talking with Bobby, Mike to tell you. And he said, if I'm DA and my back's against the wall, I'm going to go with the guy who has the experience. I'm going to go with the guy who I can say has been there before because
but he failed last year.
And
let's be honest.
Yeah.
And he did. And that's the thing. I'm not saying I agreed with Deuce, but he brings up an interesting point because, when Sean Payton did it in the prime of his career, it's one thing. He had the leash, the ability to say, yeah, there was this kid kicking at Georgia State that just started its football program, and I'm going to cut everybody in the building and bring this kid in. Payton could do that.
Wait a minute. No. That's a little revisionist history because if you remember, our kicker situation was heinous.
I'm not saying it wasn't
leading up until Lutz.
I'm not saying it wasn't, but the fact that he brought in a rookie who had not yet been in the building, who was kicking for a commuter school in Atlanta instead of like someone who had at least kicked in an NFL game before, Peyton could do that. If Dennis Allen is at least picking a kicker who has kicked at a major university, who passed the eye test in preseason. But yeah, I don't want to talk about kickers too much more, but it'll be interesting. Hopefully he doesn't miss any big ones.
I get Deuce's point, but I think we all have to acknowledge Lutz has been in decline for us the last couple seasons he's played.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's not the same guy. And last year especially, I mean, last game of the season, a great example, missing the field goal. We had held them to 80 yards. They go down, get a drive, beat us. I mean, he had a lot of big kicks that weren't great. And then he had, in London, he could have had the best kicking game in the history of the NFL if that one doesn't hit the, and it made 2 60-yarders in a single game would have been insane. So you definitely see the talent still there, but the performance just hasn't been the last couple of years. And I think it makes sense for the money.
I think a psychologist could probably do a study on the minds of kickers. There's got to be some kind of bell curve where, because one thing I do like about Groupie, he's young enough not to give a shit, right? Like, hopefully he gives him that fearless mentality. Seems to be a point where you see who was it Crosby that missed some season kicker missed
a few years ago,
a bunch of kicks in a game, and you see some of these kickers that have been around for forever that seem to get mentally rattled. It's almost like those guys have been around too long. And maybe Lutz is going in that direction. Like, he was great 2-3 years ago when he was in that mental prime, but now maybe he's too much in his head, where a rookie's going to come in and just be like, see-ball, kickball. Glad I got in the stadium. Let's have a nice day.
Yeah, kickers are an interesting breed. I mean, look at what happened with Ray Finkel. You know, you got to watch out for those guys once the mind's gone.
Yeah, they did an NFL Films on Ray Finkel, right? Wasn't it? Sable was. I don't know
Sable?
when it came out. Sable.
You say Sable, I'm pretty sure.
Steve Sable?
Yeah.
Sable.
Sable's an interesting pronunciation on it, though. I like that.
Sable.
Yeah. There you go.
One thing I didn't realize about Lutz,
with that.
just beating the kicker thing to death, is that he's the second leading scorer in Saints history. That's pretty crazy.
That's the thing. His all-time stats make you, if you just jumped in from a time machine and you say you're cutting this guy, is second leading scorer. I think he's got the all-time field goal percentage or second, something like that. It's like over the course of his Saints career, it looks great, but I agree with y'all. Last season sucked. I mean, it's hard to overlook.
Yeah.
Every kicker at some point turns into they turn into a basket case and they lose it. You lose it at some point. It just happens.
So, look, at least the rookie doesn't have like Sean Payton completely mind fucking him. Like, I felt bad for Hartley at times because like Payton was like a evil character from a Disney movie at times, where he was just like, Hartley didn't know what the hell Payton was going to, like, sometimes he's hugging him, other times he's barking at him. Like, I just remember Hartley, like, All
right, we have spent entirely too much time on kickers.
Yeah, but I did find it interesting that so Lutz, the reason I bring it up, now he goes back to Sean Payton, and all is well and good right now. He did a little interview, and weather's nice, and he's great to have a fresh start, but we know Sean, and the second he fucks up, Sean's going to just kick him out.
I don't know, Sean.
Guess what, though?
Or kick his ass.
But it doesn't matter, because I'm going to quote a friend of the pod, Ryan, unfollowed.
Yeah, unfollowed, all caps.
He's fucking gone. I could care less about Lutz at this point. He doesn't play. Just like Sean Payton. Doesn't coach for us. Don't care anymore. They're gone.
Yep. I got to go check for all those unfolloweds. I think I saw one today, but I know we're owed more. We
are. I think Ryan's slacking a little bit, so someone should shoot him a message on Twitter or X or whatever we call it.
Big Saints Twitter issue. Unless cuts don't count. Maybe it was only...
No. The cuts count, man. We got to see it.
Okay. Well, we'll have to do our research on that. All right. So we went through the Corey's final cuts, and we acknowledged Max for being correct on his Agent Zero. You stood firm on him, and I did. That was the correct.
I told you. Look, he performed, and he has position versatility. Man, he plays corner and he plays safety. Same thing with Lonnie Johnson. He can play corner. He can play safety.
Yeah. Zach Wood, big prediction by us there. He ends up making the team as the long snapper.
I feel like he's the highest paid long snapper in the league. So that's
Yeah, look, you need him. There's a reason they don't call his name during games, because he's doing his job. Knock on wood that he just keeps doing it. All right, so the practice squad, I think everyone we were hoping would clear waivers for the most part did. That came through today. Interesting how the Saints do their practice squad announcements. I mean, I guess maybe whether or not they have their full list right at the outset, or if they deliberately trickled in everything until literally the last minute before they released their official list on their website. But they had to have their practice squad submissions in, I think, by 11.
Yeah, but I mean, the official. Yeah. They
have to sign. Negotiation.
They have to sign. Yeah, it doesn't. They were trickling out because that's how they were happening.
Yeah,
and then the NFL, the transaction wire that updates at what, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, something like that. So that's when you're going to get the official list, anyway.
Yeah,
we shouldn't even be looking before then.
Because all right, so we were happy about Merriweather on the practice squad. That's good.
Shaq Davis,
John Trey, Lalos.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Lalos? Sabel?
I think is right.
Steve Sabel. Lalos. Who else was a big one from the trying to think.
I don't know. The only one I wish we would have seen that we didn't is Smoke. But we covered that enough earlier. Lucas Kroll was another one I would have liked to have seen get to the practice squad.
Well, the way that shook out, it's like he went with Sean. Like he chose them.
He was never here with Sean, so it's not like there's a connection. They just needed a tight end in Denver.
Yeah, because they traded for one from us already and are already disappointed, I'm sure.
I guess we'll never truly know if if what we even offered him, if we said, hey, come on back, or if he, whether he rejected us or not and went to, because I saw some people putting that out there, like he chose them over us. And it's I don't know, maybe not. But who cares? Like,
you got to look at it this way. There's opportunity in Denver. There's no opportunity for him.
Right. We got two.
It makes total. Yeah. I got nothing against Kroll.
Well, we have 4 tight ends ahead of him, if you count Taysom as a tight end. He has no trajectory to where he can be like a starter or even play meaningful minutes in this offense. Jawan Johnson has a new contract. Foster Moreau has a new contract. Taysom's still under his ridiculous contract. Jimmy Graham's probably only a 1-year contract, but still. Like, he's not cracking this rotation.
No.
If you look at Denver's tight end situation, they traded Noah Fant. Last year they traded Noah Fant for Russ Wilson, part of that deal. This year they traded the guy with the last name I have no idea how to say. He was a 2nd or a 3rd round pick.
Starts with
they're fan at tight end, man.
Yeah, their starter's a decent player, I think. But after that, there's nothing.
I think Lucas Kroll,
whatever his name is
it's the kid from UCLA.
Dulcich how do you pronounce it?
Dulcich, I think.
Dulcich, yeah.
Sabel. But I think Kroll is destined to drop a pass in a playoff game because Sean Payton is no stranger to that predicament. So he's got his guy, looks great, but dropped them. I don't know. It looks like a guy that's just going to drop passes unexpectedly.
I mean, at the end of the day, Kroll is just going where he's got a clearer path to playing time. It has nothing to do with being a former coach or any of that shit. There's no connection. It's literally he's going to probably the worst tight end room in the league.
Yep. The other news out of today that was interesting is that Ryan Connolly was kept, and Dennis Allen said that the injury that we thought was going to be significant was not. He was actually on the practice field today. So I think that's a pretty good get for them on the practice squad to have him and, him not have to be an IR guy necessarily. I mean, it's not earth shattering, but it was out of all the practice squad guys, I liked that one too. The running back, it turns out that Merriweather was your guy. There was reports out there of Tony Jones Jr. coming back. And then there was a little quip about, we were on our Twitter account, we were going back and forth with Ryan about it. Is that snip, snap, tit for tat with Sean and DA, but turns out Tony Jones Jr. was not on our final practice squad list, nor was Mims from Buffalo. So I thought that was interesting. Probably like you're all talking about things happening during the day that didn't pan out. So is there anything that y'all still have concern with now that we got the 53, the practice squad shook out? And like we said, there's still room for guys that aren't in the building to be in the building in the next 2 weeks, but thoughts on the final, or at least the final initial setup?
I'll say this, and I think Nick's going to say the same thing. I'd like to see another pass rusher. Maybe another running back. If Kareem Hunt would take whatever contract they're offering, someone like that. But, overall, the roster looks good. It's a talented roster. The starters from top to bottom, 1 through, I'm not going to count the 2 special teamers, so we'll say 1 through 22. They look pretty good, stacks up with any roster in the league. Some of the backups, they're backups for a reason.
Yeah.
But I feel good about where we are going into week 1.
I think on my wish list is an experienced swing offensive lineman that we can bring in? Because I don't know, man. I mean, like you said earlier in the episode, Saldivari needs some time to develop. And I don't know how good I feel about throwing him out there in the first half of the season and just having it, not Throckmorton. Obviously, there's reasons they waived him, but somebody reliable that can come in that's your seventh offensive lineman. We expect 8, 9 to necessarily not be that great, but somebody else. That would be my wish list.
Yeah, for me, it's Ed Rusher. The only other things I'd like to see is, like we talked about, Jalen get elevated. And while I'm not upset about Roby getting cut, I did like the idea of the depth with him on the roster. But
yeah, I agree.
With no injuries, that's not a problem probably. If we catch a couple injuries at that position, I'm going to be a little worried. So that one was a little curious to me. But overall, I mean, I can't say I'm disappointed with any of the moves or think any are unjustified. I think there's a case to be made for everything they did.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like Max said, for me, it's hard to say this is not an insanely or just really talented roster. I think they've got the right guys to control their own destiny. I mean, yeah, the Eagles look great or whatever, but I think we can put up a fight against most people in our conference with this roster. And that's all you're trying to do at this point in the year. But with that, which would be a good segue, we'll talk about the Saints' chances as it relates to the rest of the conference. We'll talk about some season preview topics on our next episode. We're going to be coming at you with 2 episodes next week because next week will be the first official game week of the NFL season. First NFL kickoff on Thursday. So we're going to have our season preview episode, and then our second episode next week will be with a special guest, friend of the pod. A lot of our listeners know our next mystery guest rather well, and so we'll release that in the near future. Keep up with our follow us on Twitter at 28-3 podcast. Put a lot of stuff out on there, but until next time, that's going to wrap it up for us tonight, and we'll catch y'all next episode.